Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name is Erica Peterson. I am a professor of neurosurgery here at UAMS, and when I got to UAMS in 2010, one of my goals was to try to enhance the care of movement disorders, including Parkinson's, within the state. And we started this symposium program 11 years ago to provide an opportunity to allow people and to learn more about Parkinson's and the entire breadth of what people experience with Parkinson's in their lives, as well as what we do here at UAMS to try to help people with their experience. We started offering an online version of this in 2021, thanks to COVID, and realized that we probably should have done that sooner because it's kind of hard to haul all the way into UAMS and up to the 12th floor when you have a mobility problem. And so we want to thank all of you who are here in person and thank everybody who's tuned in at home as well. The advantage of having an online virtual stream is that it's also recorded. And so we bring the link up onto our website. So if you missed something today and you want to refresh and rewind and listen again or go back and find a previous year's program, we have those archives available, and you can reach out to anybody on our team and ask us to get you a link if you can't have trouble finding it. So over the next 2 hours, we want to provide to you some really great information from some of our UAMS experts. And we will have a conclusion of the day with a Q&A panel. And so most of the opportunity for asking questions will be at the end of the sessions after our speakers have given their presentations. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. For people who are virtual, feel free to type your questions into the chat questions area of the webinar, and we will be collecting those to answer those live during the panel session. And for folks here, we'll have microphones and go around the room. So with that said, again, I want to thank everybody for your interest, your support, and being here. And it is my great pleasure to introduce one of my colleagues, our expert movement disorder neurologist, Dr. Hillary Williams. And she's going to talk to us about the complementary therapies that people can engage in when they have Parkinson's. Dr. Williams.
Alrighty. When I chose this subject, I immediately realized that I bit off a little bit more than I could chew. In order to adequately address... How do I progress the slides?
There should be
Oh, this thing. Okay, here we go. In order to do these supplements justice, it would honestly take a weekend course. So instead, this is going to be a brief review of common medication interactions and just an overall guide of how to make smarter choices. So complementary medicine is meant to be used alongside conventional practice. Alternative medicine is meant to be used instead of, and so I would prefer a complementary. The goal is to reduce symptom burden, improve quality of life, and one thing that I really like about complementary medicine is it gives patients back a sense of autonomy. That is something we could really learn from in our conventional medicine, and I hopefully try to as a group. We need to also realize that the use of plants as medicine predates written language. We owe our literal and figurative roots to shaman, to medicine men, to herbalists throughout history before conventional medicine could ever take over. And so I am not nearly as judgmental as I was at the beginning of my career. I'm quite open to the use of these things. Again, we just need to make sure we do it safely. So today is going to be the briefest review of just a few of the most common supplements I am asked about. And the goal is not for me to recommend any particular thing, but to talk about, again, how to add it in with our other medical conditions and our medicines. So, what is a dietary supplement according to the FDA? Herb, vitamin, botanical, amino acid, probiotic, anything meant to be ingested by mouth. So this will not get into peptides and things like that. One thing that I often hear is people don't want a processed or chemical medicine. And I will counteract with, well, many of these things are still processed, packaged, pilled, etc. And so that doesn't necessarily put one product over another. The FDA does not have the authority to approve these things ahead of time. If it's a novel substance since 1994, they do have to go through some sort of FDA approval process, but otherwise they can just plop these guys on the market. And so they don't, again, have to necessarily prove that they work. That doesn't mean that they don't, it just means that I may or may not have the evidence that they do. The FDA does have the authority to remove these afterwards if they are deemed unsafe. Those of us who were attempting to lose weight in the 90s can remember ephedrine, which thank goodness is off the market. And then you will often see on a lot of these dietary supplements the same warning label. Statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. The product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So where are they getting their claims from? There's a big difference between in vitro and in vivo studies. So Petri dish studies where they put a substance directly onto a nerve cell, directly onto a part of the central nervous system that's isolated, may show some benefit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in humans it's going to reach the brain by passing through the blood-brain barrier. It doesn't mean necessarily that we will absorb or digest it in the way that's intended. Another thing I often hear is, but it's natural. And I would, those of you who are my patients know that my jokes are for me, and y'all are welcome to join in, but they make me laugh first. And so nature is exceptionally effective at killing humans. It has for most of history. And so just because something is natural doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. Kratom is a naturally occurring opioid, which unfortunately many teens and young adults are now addicted to. Poison hemlock, famous for killing philosophers, and belladonna was once used to dilate the eyes and can cause a lot of central nervous system issues. So, some other issues that we have to be aware of, and again, I'm not using this talk to discourage anyone from using supplements, just that we have to have the same level of suspicion that we have with traditional pharmaceuticals, right? Which I encourage. I encourage a little bit of healthy suspicion. And so study found that in vitamin D supplements, this is just one of many over-the-counter supplements, contained anywhere from 9 to 140% of the stated dose. So you may not be receiving the amount that you think. And then there have been contaminants. And so contaminants of heavy metals, the asterisk is there because most things contain tiny amounts of heavy metals, right? Bacterial spores and mycotoxins have also been identified in several plant-based supplements. I didn't mean to double the cost. I meant to shift that over, so I apologize that that's there. So the cost, about 20 million Americans use these supplements, and it is a large, successful industry, somewhere between 30 and 150 billion, with about 800 million spent on advertising each year. That is dwarfed by traditional pharmaceuticals, so again, that is not a reason to discourage the use or the contribution of these medications, but simply that everybody's trying to make a profit. And we need to be a little bit suspicious when everybody's trying to sell us something. So, that being said, I am not offering you a cure currently. Hopefully that will change one day. So who am I to condemn you for trying something out of the box? If you are my patient, you know that I am quite open to you using supplements and something else to make you feel better in your disease process. But these are sort of my rules. Does this have established safety and side effect profiles? If it's brand new, if we have no idea if it's safe, we have no idea what it interacts with, I'm going to feel a lot less comfortable than if it's something like creatine, where we have established safety profiles. Does this interact with any of my current medications or medical problems? And does this have the potential to cause me financial harm? Financial harm is wildly subjective. For some people, that might be $50 a month. For some people, that might be $1,000 a month, right? And so it all comes down to what is acceptable within your finances and within your budget. So, starting out with some with kind of notorious medication interactions, look out for the G's. Ginkgo biloba. So many medications, conventional and herbal, are metabolized through liver enzymes. If something is an enzyme inducer, it makes other drugs metabolized by that enzyme clear out of the body faster, which may decrease their efficacy. And so an enzyme inducer, when you're talking about a blood thinner, makes the blood thinner clear out faster. And so you might have an increased risk of clotting. If it's anti-seizure drugs, it might clear out of the body faster. So now we've got a higher risk of seizures. Garlic. Now, when I'm talking about things like garlic and turmeric and ginger, there is a very, very big difference between dietary sources, like I'm eating this, I'm using this as a spice, and a concentrated extract, right? Concentrated extracts are often hundreds of times more potent, and so are going to have significantly different side effects. Potency matters. Remember that water can kill you if you try hard enough. That's why that water hazing, chugging thing they used to do in frat parties ended, because several people died. So garlic can increase our bleeding risk. It is not anywhere near as effective as traditional antiplatelets or anticoagulants, but when you add it to those drugs, could increase the risk of hemorrhage. Ginger. It's an enzyme inhibitor, so it's going to make those drugs stick around in our body a little bit longer. So that might mean that blood thinners now all of a sudden are working too well, and again, increasing risk of bleeding. Diabetic medications may work too well and cause hypoglycemia, and then anti-seizure drugs can build up into toxic levels. Green tea extract, I don't hear as much about anymore, but there were a few cases of liver failure that I saw during residency, so I felt the need to add it. So again, green tea is very, very different than green tea extract in the amount, the concentration, and the potency. So back when green tea extract was popular in sort of the late 2010s, there were hundreds of cases of liver failure across the United States. And St. John's wort, I just call St. Gaun's wort because it fits into this better. And so liver enzyme inducer with extensive medication interactions. It is one of the biggest offenders. And so you really want to make sure that you check with your doctor when you are on St. John's wort, what medications is this interacting with? Mucuna is something that I hear about a lot from my patients. This does contain a naturally occurring form of levodopa, or of L-dopa, sorry. And so some people are considering using it as a more natural levodopa. Again, the problem there is my drug consistent in its potency amongst different bottles? We don't know necessarily. Is this pure? I don't know necessarily. And so it does show in very, very short-term studies motor benefits similar to levodopa, but there's a very important reason why levodopa has carbidopa attached to it, right? Without that carbidopa, we tend to have nausea, vomiting, a lot of gastrointestinal distress, and mucuna does not contain carbidopa, and so that is the most common side effect that people see. There are not, that I could find, any long-term studies, nor could I find long-term safety data. Turmeric. Now, I'm Southern, so it's hard for me to pronounce that first R. I like to cut out letters like caramel. I know there's a second A. I disagree. And so curcumin is the main active ingredient. And so like garlic and ginger, as we talked about earlier, it is safe in dietary form. Go nuts. I got some great curry recipes to recommend y'all. But in the super concentrated form, especially with the logical fallacy that humans are want to reach, where we go, a little is good, therefore a lot must be better, right? Not necessarily. So if you take curcumin in very highly bioavailable forms, especially when they add the black pepper to it, that can cause liver failure quite rarely. And so GI distress and increased bleeding risk are the most common side effects that we see there. CoQ10, this is quite popular. A lot of my folks are taking it. It's an antioxidant, theoretically, and an enzyme cofactor. So large trial in Parkinson's disease did not show motor benefit over placebo, nor did it seem to affect disease progression. But on the other hand, it's overall safe. And so this is one that I don't have a lot of a problem with my people taking if they feel strongly about it. But when there were side effects, GI side effects were most commonly reported. Prevagen. This one makes me mad. And so the main thing that makes me mad about Prevagen is its cost. So for $120-something a month or however much they charge for it, that is, again, one of my major issues when we're talking about complementary medicine. Is this financially taking advantage of my patients who for a large part are on a fixed income, right? So although they did show that the active ingredient crossed the blood-brain barrier in dogs, it did not. They've not proven that in humans. So the blood-brain barrier, for those of you who don't know, our blood is kind of like Brita filtered into cerebrospinal fluid, and that barrier blocks a lot of drugs from entering. So that's another issue with some of these dietary supplements. If they work directly on the cell itself, will they, in an actual human body, reach the brain? And that's a major question that many of these have to answer. So a large study has shown no efficacy over placebo, and they have frequently been sued and in trouble about their deceptive marketing, which tends to say this is going to improve your memory, save your brain, etc. Lion's mane mushroom. So possible effect on neuronal health, again, in mostly in vitro studies. Studies of the extracts have shown mixed benefit. Now, the problem is these are each different formulations. So one company's lion's mane extract might be very different from someone else's. Medication interactions, again, are my main concern of today's talk. And so can cause some hypoglycemia when mixed with certain, this is the extract, can cause hypoglycemia mixed with certain diabetic medications, and may increase the bleeding risk when you are on anticoagulants. I will say, as a food, it's yummy. And so there are lots of really wonderful lion's mane steaks and things that you can make. So I strongly recommend that part. Creatine. So creatine, amino acid derivative. This is one of the most extensively studied as far as safety profile. Not necessarily efficacy, but safety profile. So it seems overall safe, but you have to take consideration if you've got chronic kidney disease or decreased creatinine clearance. No efficacy over placebo in Parkinson's disease so far. That being said, I take creatine. My thing is, I have to know that I am okay with this being a placebo. And this is something that I'm okay if it turns out to be a placebo. Similarly, I placebo myself at nighttime with a little chamomile and passion flower tea. Commonly, it's purported to help with relaxation and calming. And I'm not taking an extract, which can increase some GI side effects and bleeding risk. But as a tea, it is very helpful for placebo and self-gaslighting. And so what do you do if you want to take some of these supplements? If you say, hey, I read about this online, which the other thing is, remember, our phones are constantly monitoring and listening to us. You are being fed advertisements for cognition, for memory, for Parkinson's disease because it knows you have Parkinson's disease, right? But once again, I am never going to condemn y'all for trying something out of the box if I don't have a cure yet, right? I want to support you, but I want to support you in a way that keeps us all safe. And so ask. I am not fellowship trained in integrative medicine. I am good at Googling. And so I will look it up with you if I don't know about it and make sure, again, that we can make good choices. There are 3 theoretically pretty good companies that you can use to verify at least potency and contaminants of your supplements. That's Consumer Lab, that's USP, and that's NSF International. Again, they're very clear that they don't test whether or not they work. They test to make sure, does it contain what it says it contains? And does it not contain what it's not supposed to? Heavy metals, spores, etc. Right? So these 3 labs are good. All right, final recommendations. There is a very natural thing that humans have been doing for thousands of years that has been shown to improve motor symptoms in Parkinson's disease, has been shown to decrease the risk of certain dementias, improve your sleep, your mood, your bone density. Move. Exercise, my friends. Nothing is better than exercise. None of these supplements, even in their best claims, could come down to what exercise does for our body. Even in my past life, when I was in athletics where people like to use certain performance-enhancing drugs, things as strong as steroids were not going to build muscle. They could take steroids, they would still have to go out and move their body to get the benefit, right? Nothing is going to build muscle. Nothing is going to move your body for you. So get out and move. Some of my favorites that I recommend, I love a seated bike, although I'm pretty sure that picture's AI. We love Rocksteady Boxing or any other boxing programs for Parkinson's disease. I am a huge fan of throwing my elders in the pool. And so I love water exercise, especially for those who have back, knee, and hip pain, because it takes a lot of that pressure off and allows you a freedom of movement that we don't get. And then dance exercises are a great way to trick yourself into cardio. So all that being said, let's pick the best flavor of treating your Parkinson's disease that works with your goals, your values, your diseases, and your medications. And then we'll do it together. All right? Thank y'all. Very important. Laying down is peanut butter, and then that's miso soup. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Is outstanding, and I will try not to take Siggon's work. I appreciate the watching out for the G's. I love that you finished by talking about the importance of movement, because you did my segue for me. And so our next discussion is about exercise for Parkinson's. And so we have with us today Phil McKelvey and Jessica Horton, who are two of our outstanding movement experts when it comes to physical therapy and occupational therapy, to talk about how to get moving in ways that take us beyond getting thrown in the pool, as Dr. Williams said. So Phil, Jessica, come on up.
Testing. Can y'all hear that? Oh, there I am. Okay. Well, welcome. It's so good to be here. I'm Jessica Holton, and this is Phil McKelvey. And we have the honor of getting to talk to y'all about something we're pretty passionate about and that we get to work with here in our clinic, in the Parkinson's Clinic, and also at the IOA Community Fitness Center. So we're going to talk about exercise. And depending on where you are in your exercise journey, you might hear that word and have like existential dread. Or you might say, yeah, I've seen the benefits of having a consistent exercise program in my life and how that's affecting my Parkinson's disease. I know there are people in this audience who are committed to their exercise, and I'm glad that y'all are here. Maybe y'all can speak to it during our break. But, oh, yeah, this works. This might be familiar to you guys. I think Dr. Dahl really worked hard to get all of this into the clinic rooms on the 5th floor. And this is the Parkinson's Foundation's exercise recommendations. So we're going to kind of work through this today. We're going to talk about how much of each type of exercise they recommend, give you guys like a little taste of what that looks like, have some demonstration, and then just talk about how you can reach and make progress to meeting the goals that they have put forth. As you can see, there's 4 categories. There's aerobic activity, strength training, balance, agility, multitasking, and also stretching. So there might be one part of that where you're like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. I've got that. I'm stretching every morning before I get out of bed. And there might be one part of it that you go, ooh, I don't even want to touch that because I'm falling and I'm scared. I don't have that balance. So how can I exercise in a way that's safe for me, that makes me feel confident in my movements, and that you can find something that works for you? So just a couple of tips before you start to, either begin your journey with exercise. These are some things that we've seen in the clinic that kind of will help ensure that you're more successful with establishing an exercise routine. First would be to always try and plan your exercise during a time when you are on with your medications. That's the time that we're going to have the best balance, we're going to have the most energy, the best amount of movement. So try to exercise when your medications are really working well for you. Don't wait till the end of the day or in those in-between dose times when your movements are not as well and you're not going to be as successful and therefore feel as excited about your exercises. Always remember that something is better than nothing. A lot of the recommendations, let's see if I can go back here. A lot of the recommendations here might seem really lofty. Like 150 minutes of aerobic every week. Wow, that's a lot. Don't let that scare you. Something is always better than nothing. So even if that means I'm going to start my exercise routine and journey with like 10 minutes of the bike at a time, yay, that's great. Start to build on that rather than just thinking, oh, I can't eat this whole pie, so I'm not even going to try it. And then another important point is you're going to be more successful in adhering to your regular exercise program if you work to create a consistent exercise routine. We see this all the time in therapy. People come in, hey, how's your home exercise program going? Oh, I'm not doing it. Well, why aren't you doing it? I just don't feel like it. That's where we see that apathy that can come in with Parkinson's disease. And one of the best tools we have for combating that is, doesn't matter if you feel like it, we know it's Monday, and we know on Mondays we go to Rock Steady Boxing. Doesn't matter if it feels like it, we know that part of our bedtime routine is we do our 10 minutes of stretching before we lay down. So just incorporating that into your routine and schedule kind of takes the choice out of it. Then you don't even have to decide. Or maybe your caregiver doesn't have to continually say, hey, do your exercises. Hey, have you exercised? Have you exercised? Because that gets old too. And then the other thing that I wanted to address, I didn't put on this slide, but fatigue is also a big barrier that we hear about completing exercises. And that is a very real part of exercising with Parkinson's disease. So just like we try to time our exercises when our medication is working the best, try to plan your exercise time when you do have the most energy, and then when you can also have time after to take a rest. Maybe on the days that you have to come see your neurologist or you need to participate in the gait study, that's not the day to hit your hard cardio or your hard strength exercise. Just be cognizant of that. And then also just building in those relaxed rest times after you complete your exercise so that you can give your body time to recover and rebuild your energy. All right, our first component of exercise is stretching. So the Parkinson's Foundation recommends that we should do this 2 to 3 times a week for at least 30 minutes. That's a wonderful frequency and a goal. I've found that a lot of people are more likely to be able to complete more of like a 5 to 10 minute daily stretching and just incorporate it that way. I have found that a lot of people like to start their day with stretching. Sometimes the beginning of our day, it's harder to get our movements going. We're experiencing a little more bradykinesia, a little more of our muscle rigidity, and stretching is an excellent way to get moving before you even get out of the bed. There's common parts of our body that we want to make sure that we're stretching that are affected by Parkinson's, our glutes, the backs of our legs, our calves, and you can stretch a lot of those areas while you're in your bed. So incorporating that into your morning routine is just as effective as committing 2 to 3 days a week for 30 minutes at a time. One of the most important factors of a stretching program is making sure that we're breathing. No muscle can relax and stretch if it doesn't have oxygen. So making sure that we have nice, intentional, full breaths is really important as we stretch. Also, that it works our respiratory muscles, which are just as important to work as our leg muscles. Stretching should never feel like pain. It should just feel like a pull. If you do reach that point of pain, we want to make sure we back off. We're never trying to cause that. We just want to find that lengthening of our muscles to help maintain the muscle health. Once again, incorporating it into your daily routine. And then there's a couple of examples of exercise, of stretching, things like yoga, chair yoga, Tai Chi, Pilates. If any of that seems like super overwhelming to you, there's a lot of great resources we'll share at the end of our presentation on accessible videos that walk you through maybe a 5-minute chair stretching routine. So what we'll do next is we'll just show you guys a little bit of what a stretching routine looks like. I lead a chair yoga for Parkinson's class, and so I'll show you kind of what some of those stretches look like. So I encourage you, if you'd like, you can join along. We did this last year, I believe, at the symposium, and it was a lot of fun. So if you want, you can sit on the edge of your chair. You want to make sure your feet are on the ground. If you can, sit away from the back of your chair rather than slumping back. And the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to breathe. As we breathe, we'll bring some awareness to our posture. So as you take a nice breath in through your nose, let your shoulders come up towards your ears. And then as you breathe out, roll those shoulders down your back. And just spend the next few moments tuning in with your breath. Breathing in deeply through your nose. Feel your belly expand. And exhale, relaxing. Good. Bring your hands to your heart center. Press your palms into each other. Gently draw your wrists down. Take a breath in. As you breathe in, let's reach our arms all the way up towards the sky. Spread our fingers nice and wide. And then exhale. Let those hands come right back into our heart. Again, inhale, reach up, flowing with our breath. And then exhale, bring your hands to your shoulders. Now, I don't know about the person next to you, but they might want to keep their heads, so be aware as you bring your elbows out. But try to stretch across the front of your chest, opening it up, breathing in. And then exhale, bring the elbows together, tuck your chin, round your spine. And then inhale, open. And then exhale, come back down. Good. And then inhale, open one more time. Reach those arms up. And then we'll take our right elbow. We're going to bring it down to our left thigh. Let that left hand come to our shoulder and look over your left shoulder. Hand can come to the knee if that works better for you. And find that gentle twist. Staying with your breath, breathing in. And exhale, twisting. And then we'll come back to the middle, reach up. And then we'll take our left hand or elbow and bring it to our right thigh. Reach that right hand to our shoulder and look over our right shoulder. Phil, why aren't you doing these?
I'm supervising.
Call them out. Staying with your breath, we'll untwist, reach all the way up. And then exhale, we're going to bring our hands together one more time. Interlace your hands and push your palms towards the front of the room. Now we'll start to find that rounded spine. Tuck your tailbone now. Tuck your chin. Round like a cat. And then as you breathe in, lift the arms up. Lift your heart. Look up. One more time. Exhale. Tuck the chin. Press your hands forward. Tuck your tail. And then inhale, reach up. Let that right hand come down. Let your left hand come down. Keep your hands reaching down towards the floor, and then let that right ear reach towards your left shoulder, stretching through the side of your neck. Are you still breathing? And then back to the middle, and then left ear towards the left shoulder. Come back up, reach the arms up, and then we'll let the hands come to the thighs. See if you can step your legs out just a little bit, spread the knees wide, and gently press your knees back. All of our stretches that we do in PD yoga are targeting muscles that are affected by muscle rigidity in Parkinson's, the inner thighs, the backs of the calves. And then inhale, reach the arms up. And then exhale, let those elbows come down. Reach your spine nice and long. You can keep the elbows pressing the knees back. And then inhale all the way up. And exhale, hands to heart center. So that's just a short example of what a seated stretching routine could look like for your core and upper body. We'll go ahead and we'll pass it on to the next part. That's going to be our aerobic component of exercise. So the Parkinson's Foundation recommends that we try and get that aerobic activity, which means activity that increases our heart rate at least 2 to 3 times a week for a total of 30 minutes each time. So maybe that means Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're doing that aerobic work. Some examples of aerobic work that we really like are the recumbent bike. It's nice and safe and stable for most people with Parkinson's. You're able to get that high intensity of exercise in a safe and stable way. We recommend intervals. So working hard, working easier, going faster, going slower, just alternating between those. And we try to determine if we're meeting that intensity level that we know we need to be getting for our Parkinson's brain by looking at our heart rate There's a little quick equation for determining your heart rate goals that you'd want to be at. Or you can work off, like, we call it your rate of perceived exertion. Like, can I still talk while I'm doing this? But is it like hard and slow? That's what we're looking for. You still want to be able to talk, but it's a little bit slower. I'm having to take some breaks to get my words out. We are lucky here at UAMS. We offer a class at the Institute on Aging Community Fitness Gym called Rhythm, Boxing, and Moves. It's led by Gay Richardson, and she offers this class 3 days a week, right? So 3 days a week, you have an opportunity for a 60-minute class, right? 45 minutes? 50. That will specifically target not only your aerobic component of exercise and heart rate, but also balance, strength, and coordination. So we'll go ahead and let Gay kind of show us what that looks like for her. And for her class, do you need the chair or anything?
I'll leave it. I can show, because we do offer this class. You can do it seated or standing, and then again, you can work your intensity according to what your body tells you can do, the intensity level that you'd like. Yeah, he can. I don't know. Cue on.
Cue the music.
Cue it. We do work out to a lot of fun music, and we've lately decided, or the class as a whole has decided, we like a little bit of Latin. Are we good with the Latin music going? Oh, he said 1 minute. All right. But anyway, we do incorporate the basic boxing moves, but the biggest difference between actual boxing and what we do in the class is we always have good posture, chest up and open, and so rather than tucked down. But okay. So we usually just do it. We start with jabs. Here's our double jabs. You can join in if you'd like. All right. We do uppercuts. And this is a good one that we sometimes throw in the dual task training, where we throw in a cognitive challenge. So while you're doing the move, you're doing this, and I'm going to throw at you. I want you to say the months of the year backwards. So usually we start this, and then my class goes, okay, and they stop. I'm saying, You keep going. So you do this and say the months of the year backwards. Y'all go ahead and try it. Ready? Go. Louder. We're there. Okay. And then we can just do an uppercut swing here, and we also bring in the speed bag. We might tap. We might knee lift. We can walk sequence. And again, you can throw some math, numerical questions in there, like starting with 20, count backwards by twos, and continue. Ready? Go. 20, 18. Now I'm going to say reverse your speed bag, and reverse it. Y'all good? We don't do that every time, because a lot of times we just focus on the actual moves to get our heart rate up. Okay. Up, up, back, back, sequencing. Work it out. All right, thank y'all. And this class is held, like she said, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And also, I will attest, you can tell them, I will attest that, as Hillary said, that exercise is the key. I'm going into my 10th year of having Parkinson's. And so, exercise, best medicine.
Guys, is this, can y'all hear me? So they went through a couple categories. I'm going to knock out a couple categories, and then we'll close up with some resources for y'all. So strength is super important, and that scares a lot of people when you talk about strength training, because you may imagine needing a bunch of fancy equipment. Fortunately, that's not the case. Body weight exercises are super great. So they recommend doing strength training 2 to 3 days per week for at least 30 minutes. Again, we talked about how these recommendations can be intimidating. If you don't have 30 minutes in you 2 to 3 days a week, a couple rounds of just sit to stands from a chair, and then doing some calf raises, going up on your toes, coming down to your heels, doing 10 to 15 of those every time you brush your teeth. That's strength training. People don't think about that. Those are big muscle groups, your calves, your quadriceps, your glutes, all of those can be worked with those 2 simple exercises. You can do lifting weights, you can use machines at the gym, or like I said, those body weight exercises. We've got to be strong to stay functional, to stay at home as long as we can, to be able to, do things like play with your grandkids or your kids, or go out for a walk. So strength is a vital category, as well as the flexibility and aerobic. And then last is the balance, agility, and coordination category, which is a big category. And they recommend these to be 2 to 3 days a week, or you can just integrate them into your daily activities. So what might that look like? This is probably the most intimidating category, because to work on balance, you have to get to a point where balance is a little bit challenging. I didn't say a lot challenging. I didn't say going to the point where you're going to fall half the time. But if you can get yourself to the point where you notice a little quiver, so for you, that may look like standing with your feet together, or standing one foot in front of the other, or standing with your feet staggered, or standing on one foot with your toe back on the ground, or standing on one foot. All of that would be static balance, standstill balance. But what I want to see is a little bit of wobble, doing this at a countertop, and holding for 20 to 30 seconds. That's building strength as well. It's a bonus. That would just be static balance. Multi-directional stepping is some of the best way you can train yourself to prevent from falling, because if you fall, it's because you moved quickly and you weren't able to take that correctional step. So there's an app called Clock Yourself on the App Store for iPhones and Androids. It's super good at walking you through multi-directional stepping. I think it's like $2.99, but it's just a one-time thing. Or it can simply look like you stepping to a clock face. So stepping to 12 o'clock, to 1 o'clock, to 2 o'clock, et cetera, and working all your way down. Doing that as quickly as you can safely. That's a great way to train yourself to be have less of a fall risk. Dynamic balance activities, a lot of times those are best introduced through physical therapy or occupational therapy, but that's moving while you're balancing. So that could be something as simple as walking, using your support device just as much as you need to, or if you don't have one. Like I said, a lot of that can be introduced via PT or OT. And then large amplitude movements. Amplitude-based training, there she is. Jessica's going to show you a few of these. So LSVT big, some of you may be familiar with, some of you may have done this with Jessica. So these are some seated LSVT big moves. There's also something called Parkinson's Wellness Recovery, or POWER, which is kind of like Big's cousin. They're branches off of the same tree. They're all amplitude-based training exercises, and they are really, really good for perfect. And they're standing. So you can see it's incorporating a lot of the things that we were talking about, like multi-directional stepping, shifting your weight, twisting. Those are great. You can learn those in PT or OT, or there's some online resources that I'll share with you in just a second. And then multitasking, like Gay mentioned, throwing in multitasking drills for yourself. She mentioned a few good ones, or like category exercises are good. I'm going to name every brand of cereal I can name, every NFL football team I can name, every college basketball mascot I can think of, and just go with that while you're working through balance is a great way to work. So not as much demonstration for me, I apologize, but we had two great presenters right before me that took care of that for me. So some resources for you. Here at UAMS, we have the Rhythm Boxing and Moves class that we talked about, taught by Gay, LSVT Big for Life, taught by Jessica. That's something you have to have gone through LSVT Big before you do that at some point in your Parkinson's journey. So it could have been somewhere else and you come to the class here. It doesn't have to be taught by one of us. There's PD Foundations of Exercise, and then there's the Better Balance and FAM class. All of these are great for people with Parkinson's. The first three are specific to people with Parkinson's. Some online resources, I believe y'all can get the slides of this online. These are links in them. But Rogue Physical Therapy and Wellness on YouTube has great exercise videos for free. Power for Parkinson's is a nonprofit, I believe, out of Austin, Texas. They have great exercise videos, a lot of them seated for free. And the Parkinson's Foundation, if you just search Parkinson's Foundation exercise videos, they have a whole battery of free resources that are exercise videos you can follow along with. Find something that feels hard but doable. It doesn't have to be impossible. It doesn't have to be wearing you out, but you want a little bit of a challenge, because if you don't challenge yourself, you're not going to change yourself. And then within Arkansas, there's Rock Steady Boxing in several cities. Conway at the Little Rock Athletic Club, Hot Springs Village, Harrison, Mountain Home, Jonesboro, El Dorado. I know we have people in here from across the state and joining us online from across the state. There's a dance class here in Little Rock, Arkansas Festival Ballet Dance for Life. And then in Fort Smith, they run a class called Shift Arkansas, which is kind of like a high-intensity interval training, or what some people might think of as CrossFit for Parkinson's, which I've witnessed, and it's super incredible. If you're in that area, you can check that out as well. To be in the know about this stuff, send an email to sj.dahl@ums.edu, and you can be placed on our newsletter. And thank y'all for listening, paying attention to us today. I'll wrap us up there.
I saw people moving. That's outstanding. And Gay, well done. Thank you for doing all that demonstration. I'm tired from sitting in the seat trying to keep up with you. And so we're going to continue with one of the hits. Everybody, when they fill in the evaluations at the end of the sessions, which please fill in your evaluation today and provide us feedback. But we get great comments on wanting to have as much update as possible on what's new, what's coming with research and new medications. And so we have this session again this year with Dr. Dahl, who is a professor and chair of the Department of Neurology and medical director of our clinical trials unit. Dr. Dahl, come on.
It's great to see everybody here. Thank you for taking time on your Sunday to be with us. I'm going to focus my talk on a couple of, related issues. One is why I believe clinical trials, clinical research is important. And the other is to kind of highlight what we've been able to add to when it comes to treating Parkinson's from work that happened here at UAMS and what we're working on next. So let me see. These are my disclosures. I'm a clinical trialist. I do a lot of this. Some of the research that I'm going to talk about briefly today are the highlighted companies that sponsored that work. But I'll try and keep this free of commercial bias. That's my promise to you. As a part of the objectives, I want to update people about what are the treatments for motor fluctuation that especially we at UMS have been able to add to our armamentarium from work that has happened in the last 7 years, 8 years or so here in our trials unit, and then update on disease-modifying treatment trials, which I've been involved in for about 20 years, 17, 18 years going, and we still have to find the first pill or infusion that works nearly as effectively as exercises as you've just heard. But we're working on it. We continue to knock at doors. And that remains probably the biggest research need in Parkinson's disease is how do we improve progression of Parkinson's. At this point, so I made a note to myself to share a personal story about why research, I believe, is important. And many of you know my personal connection with Parkinson's disease, but this is about, and my uncle, my dad's younger brother, who had lymphoma. He had small lymphocytic lymphoma, diagnosed in 1996. I remember I was a medical student, hadn't started my clinicals when he had the biopsy done that confirmed that it was a lymphoma. And at that time, survival for lymphomas, just, when somebody is given bad news about a chronic illness, be it Parkinson's, be it some sort of a cancer, that's hard. So you immediately start to look, hey, what does this mean for me? And so we looked, and survival was not promising. It was off the order of a number of years, about 8 years or so. And treatments at that time were largely chemotherapy. This is what we do. This is a set of protocols that is used to allow for that type of survival. During the time of his treatments, I came to the U.S. I was at MD Anderson. I remember talking with a professor about what's new, what are some of the treatments available for that type of lymphoma. And in 1997 in the U.S., there was a drug called rituximab. It's a monoclonal antibody, very commonly used. I don't know, many of you probably have heard of rituximab. It's now used for immune disorders. That was being used for lymphomas that were refractory to conventional chemotherapy. And so, interestingly, that drug was available in India under a different name called Mabthera. We had to work for him to be on it. It bought him about 12 additional years. So Mabthera was introduced about 1997 in the U.S., right after he was diagnosed with the lymphoma. Treatments that are in the works, treatments that we are developing now, likely will have meaningful impact on survival, on disability for our patients living with Parkinson's. So it's not, many people feel that the development of these drugs is too slow to have an impact on us now. And the message that I want to convey is that these drugs will meaningfully improve survival, will meaningfully improve disability, and that's why I continue to remain engaged in this. So both progression side and ameliorating symptoms, those are the equations that I work largely on solving and addressing needs and disparities. That's at the departmental level, at the institutional level, that's one of the main missions that we're trying to serve. Let's go to on the actual research side of things. The pathology of Parkinson's disease is because of damage to nerve cells that are making dopamine. There are clumps of abnormally folded protein called Lewy bodies that deposit in the nerve cells. And there's progression of that damage from the stem of the brain, if you think of the brain like a cauliflower, kind of the stem of the cauliflower, all the way up to the florets. And as that pathology spreads, there's more and more dysfunction in the brain. What causes that spread of pathology is complex. There's going to be a test about this diagram at the end of it. But we've been in a time of exploration, of explosion of our understanding of Parkinson's disease in the last 2.5 decades, to where we're understanding what the misfolded protein alpha-synuclein does, how does it trigger damage to nerve cells, how do genes play a role, and we're talking about genes. I don't know how many of you have, those with Parkinson's have had gene testing for their Parkinson's. Can I see? Okay, wonderful. So, a bunch of you have had genetic testing for Parkinson's, and that's one of the research studies available to us for us to improve our understanding of Parkinson, how it affects you, and understand what treatment options may exist now or in the future. I encourage everybody to get gene testing done. So in these schema, there's a couple of areas where genes for Parkinson's there's LRRK2, there is Parkin play a critical role in the propagation of damage at the cellular level. So understanding that allows us to both see if there are targeted therapies that we can use to slow the degeneration of Parkinson's for you, not just based on the gene itself, but some of the downstream mechanisms. And actually so some of the disease-modifying treatments that I'm going to talk about involve that, either at the level of the gene itself or downstream from that gene. So I asked about how many have had gene testing done. That is, again, a study that's available. Julie at the back does these every day in the clinic, takes samples and gets people consented to send them to send the blood samples to the Parkinson's Foundation so we can understand if there are genetics involved in Parkinson's disease. I encourage you to participate in that. The disease-modifying trials that we have currently undergoing is, so I remember one of our LRRK2 subjects was going to be at the symposium. Are you here? Yep, perfect. So thank you for being here. Thank you for taking your time. So we have a clinical trial looking at LRRK2, leucine-rich repeat kinase type 2, which is a protein that it's an enzyme that tags other proteins with phosphate and shuttles them for degradation, damage, or increased activity of LRRK2, causes damage to the garbage disposal system of the cell. And that causes the cell to kind of drown in its own waste. This is a simplistic way of looking at it. And we're trying to see if we could change that biology by reducing LRRK2 activity. We have people actively in that research study. We're optimistic that that's going to help with progression of the disease. And this is, again, one of the targeted gene-based treatments that we're testing. Another one is a monoclonal antibody. So I talked about rituximab, which is a monoclonal antibody. It's an antibody that the rituximab binds to CD20 and causes damage to lymphocytes. That mechanism has been used for a development of an explosion of antibodies at different targets. And since in Parkinson's, it's alpha-synuclein, this misfolded protein that clumps up and causes damage, there's antibodies to a specific conformation of alpha-synuclein, a specific type of misfolding of alpha-synuclein that we're testing in a phase 3 study. So, So phase 3, this part is important. Clinical trials happen in different phases. Phase 1's typically first in human trials are just trying to understand safety of a drug. Phase 2's, again, look at the appropriate dose, sometimes look at effectiveness. Phase 3's are as close to the clinical launch of a medicine. So if a drug is tested and is found to be positive depending on the mood of the FDA, a certain number of phase 3 studies, then it technically can be marketed after approval. So we have phase 3 of this monoclonal antibody called prasinezumab, or PRASI, in Parkinson's disease among people who are on levodopa. I don't know how many of you are on levodopa in the group. I'm surprised. It's probably the majority of you. So on levodopa within a certain amount of time, within the first few years of the disease, and not experiencing fluctuations or ups and downs in control. So the criteria for eligibility kind of narrow the group that can be on this trial. But you bet once the drug is found to be effective, we're going to be using it outside of those narrow bounds. We're going to be using it in as many people as we can to see if we can maximize that benefit. And that trial is also open to enrollment. As far as reducing motor symptoms, so reducing some of the problems associated with motor function in Parkinson's, when we talk about motor dysfunction in Parkinson's, the specific issue we've been able to address is about ups and downs in control of symptoms, what is called motor fluctuations. And this is from my mentor at UAB, Dr. Standard, gave it to me. It's a diary of a banker keeping track of this. A doctor could never do that. We would never track our stuff like this. It's all a blur to us. But there's a diary of a banker keeping track of when they took their medicine and how they were feeling. And these ups and downs are kind of time locked in middle courses of Parkinson's disease to timing of your medicines. At the peak of the dose, the gentleman notes that he has abnormal movements of the face. There's a mixture of tremor and facial dyskinesias that he mentions. And then at the bottom is, at the low times, is impaired mobility or difficulty getting around. And so this is one of the issues that we've worked a long time on trying to solve in Parkinson's disease, and there are a multitude of options available to address this, including where Dr. Peterson brings her skill set with deep brain stimulation. But it'd be nice to try and level this out for as long as possible without putting rods in your brain. And so some of the therapies that are being tested, one of them is dopamine-making cells being implanted into the brain. So it's not rods. There's nothing left that Dr. Peterson would leave in the brain, but a bunch of cells that are implanted in a part of the brain called the striatum, where dopamine works. And again, this is a common question in the clinic. I don't know how many of you have asked your doctor about stem cells in Parkinson's disease. So can I see a show of hands? So there's some people who've asked their doctors about stem cells. And stem cells, when we think about them addressing damage to Parkinson's disease, our hope is that they'd somehow make the brain whole again. Fix the dead parts of the brain, so to speak, and allow it to work normally. So this is an attempt at doing that. These are not stem cells that have been kind of coerced along their differentiation to where they're only going to make dopamine-making cells, or actually these are mature dopamine-making cells that are being implanted with the hope that most of them are going to survive the procedure, or a proportion are going to survive and make the brain whole. And that is one of the stem cell-based or dopamine replacement cell-based therapies that we're going to have here at UAMS. We're recruiting for that. There's one of my partners, Dr. Vermani, who's out with allergies, has a study with Dr. Peterson for improving the issues with severe tremor that does not respond to medications, or freezing of walking, feet getting stuck on the ground. These are issues that our meds typically are unable to fix today. Our medicines do not help with freezing a gait nearly as much as we'd want. And treatment refractory or medication refractory tremor by definition is refractory to medicine, is not adequately addressed. So we're working on seeing if spinal cord stimulation, a lot less risk than sticking rods in the brain, subjectively, would be able to help with these issues in Parkinson's. And then I'll briefly do a kind of a lap of, celebrating our successes here. The therapies that we've been able to develop, one is a drug called Crexant. How many of here are on Crexant? Okay. So Crexant is an extended or a new extended release version of carbidopa, but Justin in the back and Ms. Dolores help us get tons of people on Crexant because it does work really well to address fluctuations. And this is from our work as a group. This is a royal hour. Getting the Crexant 2 market, showing that it reduces the ups and downs in control of symptoms. This is another study, or based on another study of a medicine given directly under the skin, subcutaneous infusions of a drug called Vyalev, so prodrug to carbidopa-levodopa, with the goal of maintaining pretty steady blood levels of medicine by giving it directly under the skin, kind of like an insulin pump. I don't know how many are on subcutaneous. Okay, awesome. So there's a few who are on Vyalev. We're developing a competitor drug that hopefully is going to come to the market next year by a company called Neuroderm. And our expectation is that both Vyalev and the drug from Neuroderm would reduce fluctuations significantly. And then this is an oral medicine called tavapadon that we finished development of. That's going to become available either second half of this year, latest, or early next year, probably second half of this year. It's a dopamine agonist, works a little different than the other available ones, works on a different set of receptors in the brain. The drug is called tavapadon, and again, the main goal, the main kind of utility is in reducing off times amongst people who are on levodopa, or reducing disability amongst people who were treatment naive, were not on any dopamine drugs at the time of entering into this study. Upcoming research projects, those with early Parkinson's, we think that we're going to have a clinical trial of medicine that reduces the propagation of Parkinson's through dampening effects on another protein kinase called c-Abl. It looked promising in one of the phase 2s that we did. We think that we're going to start recruitment for the maybe phase 2B at the end of this year. For people with advanced Parkinson's with motor fluctuations, there's a phase 2 of a drug that is to reduce fluctuations that we're going to have starting in the next quarter or so. And then the symposium is open to everybody, including those with atypical Parkinsonism. And those of our patients who have a condition called PSP, progressive supranuclear palsy, we have a phase 3 of a novel medicine that helps reduce the misfolded tau from aggregating and causing damage in PSP. So, and there are going to be others. We're a part of a consortium looking at a platform of medicines to help PSP. So hopefully we'll have other PSP studies. We just finished with an MSA trial. So we're trying to bring clinical trials for atypical Parkinsonism here to help serve those of our patients who have atypical forms. For better understanding of Parkinson's, as you leave, Lakshmi has 2 tables that are talking about resources, including a trial looking at virtual education in Parkinson's, using short videos to try and inform you about various aspects of Parkinson's disease. We've had that open for a while, and that will, I expect, would continue to be open for the near future. We'd love for you to participate. Dr. Virmani also has his gait lab that assesses motor freezing of walking in Parkinson's, also assesses how cognition impacts the overall progression of Parkinson's disease, and does remote assessments for monitoring Parkinson's. And he's validating whether we could provide good services to telemedicine. So many of those are open opportunities. We'd love for your engagement in those. And this is our group. This is what we've been able to build so far. With that, there's going to be time for questions at the end of this, but thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Dahl. There's a lot happening, and one of the advantages of building a program here is that we get the opportunity to bring a lot of different potentials to a state where before we built this program, there was really a scattering of resources. And so what you've seen through that last slide of Dr. Dahl's is how many people there are involved in trying to innovate and support in Parkinson's as part of that. And one of the things that we all share in common, and is what underlies the research that we're doing here, is hope. The opportunity for us to impact, provide new directions, new opportunities, and explore new ways to treat each individual and understand a direction that may help them when other options haven't worked for them as well. And so I've been very grateful to get to work with all of these colleagues. And our next speaker is one of them. Dr. Hannah Schweitzer is one of our neuropsychologists, and she is an expert on all things related to thinking and evolution of how the behavioral side of Parkinson's and cognition change over time. So Dr. Schweitzer?
All right, so we're going to be speaking about psychosis and Parkinson's disease, and then after this we'll have our Q&A panel, and then we'll be done for the day. So hope y'all are hanging in there. I think we're doing great. So briefly, I'm going to talk over a quick background of what we're looking for with psychosis. We're going to talk about some medication interventions, and then we're also going to talk about coping with psychosis if it's something that you or a loved one are experiencing. So briefly, about 1 in 3 individuals who has Parkinson's disease is going to experience psychosis over that course of treatment. This can be associated with high levels of stress, worsened quality of life, and there's also a lot of relationship between the development of psychosis and Parkinson's disease and other diagnoses like depression or dementia. This is also linked to difficulties with cognitive functioning, like your attention or your visuospatial skills. This is something that is fairly common. There's a lot of different types of psychosis. I'm going to outline a couple that are most common with Parkinson's disease. Visuals tends to be what we see primarily. So especially if there's dim lighting or if it's at the end of the day, you're very fatigued. Also, your insight into this might fluctuate over time. Sometimes you may be able to tell, hey, what I'm seeing over there in the corner might not actually be here. Sometimes we can't tell. Auditory is less common. And unlike a diagnosis of something like schizophrenia, where those voices may be threatening or malicious, that tends to not be the case. Usually people with Parkinson's tend to report hearing random talking, people laughing, other things like that. Sometimes we can have a presence hallucination. It feels like someone is nearby or right over our shoulder. Sometimes there's a passage hallucination where we feel like something just left out of the corner of our eye. We can also have illusions or misperceptions. If you see a mailbox and think that it's a dog, or see a tree and think that it's a person. So there is a physical object there that you're seeing. Your brain's just misinterpreting what's actually there. Delusions are also something that we see a lot with Parkinson's disease, and I'm going to focus on how to interact or work with a loved one who may be experiencing them in a few slides down. A lot of times they focus on a single theme. So this is a really strong belief, and even if you have evidence to the contrary, this person may be very fixated on this belief. It might be about infidelity, jealousy, general paranoia. There's also some misidentification syndromes. So these are a lot more rare, but there are still things that can occur, so it's important to know about them. We've got capgras, where you may believe that a close family or friend is in disguise and been replaced by an identical imposter. With Fragoli, you may believe that someone else is a familiar person in a disguise trying to harm you. So either way, if you've got someone in your life who isn't necessarily believing that you are who you say you are, that can be a good signal that there might be something happening in terms of psychosis. One of the other important things to know when I'm talking about psychosis is if this comes up really suddenly, if you or your loved one also are having trouble paying attention in a conversation, recognizing people, knowing where you are, it can be a sign of something underlying medically, like an infection or something like that. So if this starts to happen with all of those other symptoms, please call a doctor immediately. But a lot of the times, these are things that occur due to buildup of the medications in our body. So we're on medications for dopamine. Sometimes the more dopamine builds up in our bodies, the more likely it is that we experience something like psychosis. Some of the medications that we also use to reduce those off times that we take in addition to the carbidopa-levodopa can also increase our risk for experiencing psychosis. There are other medications like Benadryl that can also impact your risk, and depending on if you undergo DBS, if you had a subthalamic placement, that may also increase your risk. There's also some internal factors that we can carry as well of an older age, experiencing some cognitive impairment or depression, if we have certain genes or alleles that do make us more vulnerable, or if we're disrupting our sleep a lot. And I'll be talking about sleep so much today because it is so essential to all brain health. All right, I am not a prescribing provider. These are some medications. I'm not recommending one over the other. Most of our medications that we use for treating psychosis will negatively impact the medications that y'all will take for Parkinson's. So there's a very small pool that providers have to choose from. Here's some of those medications that they may offer or that you may discuss with a provider. The important thing is to speak openly with your provider about what you're experiencing. We can't help you if we don't know what's going on. The other thing to know is that a lot of these medications are going to have cognitive impacts. So people will talk about feeling slower in their thinking, kind of sluggish, some brain fog, having trouble paying attention or remembering things. There's no right or wrong choice between what you want from a medication or what side effects you don't want to experience. Some people prefer to not have those cognitive side effects, so they choose to leave the medication alone. Sometimes people want to navigate those side effects because of the relief that it can bring. So again, no right or wrong choices, just know that those are the options that you have to think through for your own treatment. All right, so let's talk about coping with psychosis. So one of the ways I want to frame this is specifically about control. So psychosis is pretty similar to depression and anxiety in the sense that having Parkinson's can make you a lot more vulnerable to experiencing psychosis. We can't control that we have Parkinson's. What we can control are the things that we do day in and day out to reduce the risk of experiencing those psychotic symptoms. One of the first things I want to talk about are values and consistency. So, with both Parkinson's and psychosis, they can be incredibly isolating. So I talk with patients all the time who say they don't want to go out in public because it feels like they can't trust that their body's going to do what their brain's telling it to do. And you're telling your leg to move forward, it's kind of frozen, it's stuck there. So that leads to more isolation and pulling back. The same thing happens with psychosis, and then it can feel extra frustrating because not only can I not trust my body, but now I can't trust my brain anymore, that it's accurately perceiving what's around me. And that also leads to continued isolation. Isolation is a very significant indicator of psychosis. Like the more we isolate ourselves, the more likely we are to experience those symptoms. One of the other things to think about is with psychosis, similar to anxiety or depression, we tend to get the paranoia or the delusions or the hallucinations around things that we care about and really value. If you value your job and then you feel like your boss is going to fire you, that creates a lot of anxiety. The same thing happens with Parkinson's. If we're feeling isolated, we're feeling withdrawn, we may start to wonder, are we a burden to family? Do people actually want to spend time with us? The things that are important to us can sometimes be further out, and that can increase our risk of experiencing psychosis with those themes. So one of the best things that we can do day in and day out is consistently engage in activities that meet those values and themes. But a lot of times our Parkinson's can make that difficult, right? So I will tell you a story about my dad. My favorite thing to do with my dad is try new restaurants, specifically Chinese food. This is something that we've done since I was about 5 years old. And when he was first diagnosed with Parkinson's, we were able to do this still pretty consistently. But as the disease progressed, we were no longer able to enjoy our time together. You know, it was really crowded in the restaurant. He wouldn't want to be near crowds. He talks really quietly. I couldn't hear him over the noise of the restaurant. Sometimes his medications would mess with his appetite. But this is something that's still really important to both of us, so we had to adapt and be flexible and make things work. So we started eating at 3 p.m. when no one else was in the restaurant. I started grabbing food and bringing it to the house so that we could talk in a quiet location. Like, there are ways to be flexible around what matters to you and what you find meaning from in life. And if we're meeting these goals every day, it really reduces the risk of paranoia or delusions. Another thing that I know Jess and Phil also brought up is that apathy is huge with Parkinson's. We might not always feel like doing these things. So we're trying to figure out what feels not overwhelming, what feels manageable, whether or not it sounds enjoyable, what feels manageable in the day that can still meet those needs and that we're still doing something that feels meaningful and matters to us. Like our goal for all of you, at least my goal for all of you, is to have lives that are meaningful and full in a safe way. So being able to find those is incredibly important, and it reduces a lot of those symptoms of anxiety and depression and psychosis. So let's talk a little bit about day in and day out, what you can do. So scheduling is essential for reduction of any mood symptom, but especially psychosis, which is great because I know everyone else here has also recommended a schedule in terms of exercise or in terms of other goals to hit. Making sure that you're structured is going to be essential here. We want to avoid that all or nothing thinking. So like both Parkinson's and psychosis can really mess with our flexibility or how we think around a certain topic. So if we don't feel like going out to dinner with 20 people because it's family night, things like that, we might just say, I'm not going to dinner at all. But how can we be flexible? Can we maybe see a couple people early on? Can we do something else the next day? Finding that flexibility so that we're still making those goals and meeting those needs. Said I would talk about sleep. Here it is again. This is so important. And also I know that Parkinson's can really disrupt your sleep in so many different ways. But if we're talking about those basic sleep hygiene tasks of making sure that you're waking up and going to bed around the same time, that you're in a cool, dark room when you're sleeping, that you're staying off your phones before bed, a lot of that can really contribute to consistent sleep, and that really reduces your risk of experiencing psychosis. I want to make sure that you're regularly interacting with other individuals. This can look a lot of different ways depending on what you need in the moment or in that day. So this can be having conversations or playing a card game with someone. This can also be really passive. If you go see a movie, go to a sports game, you're still around people and you're grounded in an environment, but you don't necessarily have to hold a conversation if you don't feel like it. If you are experiencing psychosis, we want to keep track of those symptoms, much like the symptom log that Dr. Dahl's patient had made from earlier. If these are happening at night when you're tired or when your medication's wearing off or when you just took a new medication, if we know this, we can plan around this pretty easily. If we know that, hey, late at night is when I tend to feel more anxious and more paranoid, we can plan activities to do during that time that can soothe that anxiety. Like, let's engage as a family in that time instead. I also want to talk about the importance of grounding. Like any time that you're able to physically interact with the environment around you, notice what you're able to taste, smell, touch, all of that, the more that we stay present in our own environment, the easier it is to kind of ignore any symptoms of psychosis or think them through and push them off to the side when they come up. All right, so that was a lot of day-to-day scheduling. What I've got right now are interventions for kind of in the moment. So if you are someone who experiences delusions or paranoid thoughts, I've got some recommendations. The first thing we want to do is not pretend that it isn't there or avoid thinking about it. If you've heard the famous thought exercise of don't think about a pink elephant and then that's all you can think about in your brain, super similar for delusions. If we keep trying to say, I'm not going to think about this, I'm not doing it, not very helpful. What we have to do is look at this with curiosity. Is this a thought that someone else would have if they had the same data we had? Am I thinking with my feelings instead of looking at the facts of the situation? Is there evidence for or against the thought I'm having? Once we've examined that thought, we're just going to let it go. We don't have to hold on to it. It doesn't have to stay with us for the rest of the day. We're just going to notice the thought, look at it, and then it's going to keep going. We also want to focus on what we're doing in those moments, not just what we're thinking. So again, it goes back to that grounding. Like, how are we interacting in our physical environment? What can I touch? What can I see? What can I hear that isn't just this thought? If you are a loved one or a caretaker for someone that has a delusional or suspicious thought, like a lot of times, our relationships are really important, and those delusions can focus around like spousal infidelity or family trying to leave. And that can be incredibly heartbreaking to hear in the moment if it's something that you aren't expecting. Here's the image I want everyone to have in your mind if someone's coming to you with a delusional thought. Like, this is our fence. This is our neutral fence right in the middle. I'm not trying to pull this person over to my side. I'm not trying to convince them that they're wrong and I'm right. I'm also not hopping over onto the fence onto the other side and just going with that delusion. What I'm doing is I'm staying neutral and I'm sitting in there with that curiosity as well. So we'll talk about an example of this. So if someone accuses you of leaving, this can be you're trying to leave the marriage, you're trying to leave me late at night. There's a lot of really unhelpful responses. We can just blow them off and say, yeah, you're right. I've been planning to do it for months. You got me. You can have that confrontation of like, I can't believe you would say that after everything I've done for you. You can do that placating of, oh, it's okay, everything will be okay. Or just ignoring that and saying, well, what do you want for dinner? None of that actually addresses the underlying emotion of the thought. Some of them can feel really good to say in the moment, but it's not helpful long term, right? So what we want, again, is that neutral collaboration. Was there something that happened to make you think that? What can we do in the moment to make you feel safe? You're not saying yes or no, that's right or that's wrong. When someone has a delusion, we're not going to win and convince them of our side or break them of the delusion in that one interaction or conversation. What we want to do is acknowledge that underlying emotion and then do something that meets those needs and values. All right, do you want to play a game together tonight? Do you want to go for a walk? Should we sit and do some seated chair yoga together? And then we can knock out the exercise as well. Anything that we can do to stay neutral. And again, I want to acknowledge that that can be incredibly hard in those moments when you have been giving a lot of yourself to a partner and then are faced with an accusation like that. So if we're able to prepare ahead of time, should this happen, it can feel a lot easier in the moment to stay neutral. If you have visual hallucinations, lighting is going to be great for you, okay? So use a nightlight. Sometimes they can occur as you're falling asleep or as you're coming out of sleep. Just something to be aware of, and if you can play with the lighting in your room a little bit, that can be helpful. This is also really good for fall prevention, so please just have good lighting anywhere. If you can provide competing visual input, that can be a great relief for your brain. So going into a separate room, going on a walk, changing your environment. If you're not able to do that really quickly, shift your focus to the things that you know are in the room if you're having a visual hallucination, and work on describing them. I see 2 square tissue boxes and 1 rectangle. Keep going from there. If you've got auditory hallucinations, we can listen to music, we can distract ourselves. This also works with visual. Something that we do a lot with anxiety that also does work for auditory hallucinations is scheduling a time to listen to those voices. If you are like me and you procrastinate, this one comes really easily because all we're doing is pushing it off until later. We're saying, I hear you, I'll talk with you at 5, I'll listen to you at 5 o'clock. Whether or not, like if you do at 5 o'clock, that's fine, it's contained in that one area. But we also want to balance this with thinking about positive interactions or making sure that we're talking with other individuals as well. This kind of gives us a place and a time to address those voices, and it doesn't kind of take over the rest of our day. Mental imagery is also something that people have found really helpful when they hear voices. If you picture yourself throwing a blanket over it, turning down the noise on the radio. If you remember being on an airplane and a really noisy baby was right behind you, what do you do to tune that out? We can do the same things here. You also want to remind yourself of times and places where those voices were less common. So again, with psychosis, with depression, with anxiety, with Parkinson's, it's really easy to go black and white, all or nothing. So when we're in the middle of experiencing something like psychosis, it can feel like this is the only thing I'm ever going to remember, and I cannot believe that this is where my life is at. We got to have that balance, and that's why it's so important to have those positive experiences day in and day out where we're actually doing what we care about as well. My final recommendation is coping cards. We can have a really good conversation with someone if they are feeling a delusion. We can stay neutral with them. We can walk them through the moment, and then the same thing might happen the next day. So what's really helpful is to have these cards where you can make them with your family, make them on your own, but just ways to remind yourself that, like, I'm not crazy, I'm not a bad person. My brain's trying its best. People in my life care about me and love me. Having those reminders that you're able to physically look at and interact with can also really help with grounding and staying in the moment. So, if we have to sum up what we're doing, right? We're staying neutral, we're staying flexible. We're doing things every day that can meet those goals and values. And that flexibility is so important. I will give another story of my dad. He and my mom looked forward to traveling for all of retirement. And then he wasn't able to sit on a plane for very long or sit in the car. So what they ended up doing was getting the unlimited Amtrak passes and just traveling around the country every summer. He was able to get up and walk and do all his exercises on the train. But finding those ways to meet those goals in a way that's safe and meaningful and full for your life can really reduce both psychosis and any other mood symptoms. Here's my email. You know where to find me. A lot of people will tell Dolores that the redhead is someone they want to talk to, and they end up in my inbox. So that's my name, but if you don't remember it, it's okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to ask all our panelists to come up for our Q&A panel. So we have 2 knowledgeable redheads on stage. If Dr. Williams will come up and join us too. And then while everybody's coming up, I just want to ask folks to, first of all, fill out those evaluations and let us know what you've liked and what areas we can start working on for next year's symposium as well. We've always picked to do this in April because it's Parkinson's Awareness Month. And but there's other things that we can do throughout the year. There are other programs you saw in our little goodie bag. There's some flyers there that talk about some of the other programs that we have. Additionally, you'll notice that there's not a lot of exhibitors here. None of the drug companies are trying to convince you to sign up and, get a piece of you. We've intentionally made this a safe space for you to just get information from our faculty experts. And Dr. Dahl, you're coming too, right? Did we run out of chairs? Yeah. Come stand next to me. And then, that said, we try to fund this through donations. So if you know people who are interested in supporting the program, they can click through the donations at UAMS link and specify that this is for the movement disorders program. And that helps to underwrite the efforts that we have here in trying to expand our programs. And that includes some of the outreach and other opportunities within art. Our Parkinson's Walk, which was the first one, was at the zoo last fall, and a lot of other opportunities. And it doesn't have to be a large contribution. Every little bit helps. And the more that people are engaged, the more they're aware, and that then turns into opportunities for us to reach more people and make more differences. So we have a couple folks with microphones to come around and answer questions. I ask you to keep these general. We are not going to be able to answer specific questions about your own health condition. That's most optimally handled in a private conversation with your clinicians, but you can reach out to any of us about those, and we want to have those conversations. So if you have questions, just raise your hand and someone with a microphone. There's one question over here already, and we've got another one up front. So we'll start with those, and then we also have some questions from online. If you have more questions, you can put them in the questions on the online chat, and I'll try to weave those in also. Please, sir.
Yes, I like questions about on the DBS surgery and your focused ultrasound. Mm-hmm. When you have those two procedures, what symptoms go away and which ones remain after those symptoms, after you have those surgeries? I always hear about what they improve, but I never hear what's left. Mm-hmm. So for DBS and for focused on ultrasound, and when is UAMS going to do focused ultrasound?
Well, thank you for that. I'll talk a little bit about it, but then I would love for our neurologist to comment as well, because what I do in surgery with DBS is implant the leads. I know you call them rods, I call them leads. But they're wires in the brain that go to a pacemaker device, and that device is adjusted to give a different dose of electricity into the Parkinson center of the brain. And then our neurologists spend a lot of time dosing that setting, along with how medications and physical therapy and other things all come together to try to get the best optimal response in terms of symptoms. But it does work better for some symptoms than others. Part of that has to do with where within the brain we place the electrode wires, and the same thing goes for focused ultrasound. So focused ultrasound, for people who don't know, is a non-invasive technique where bunches of beams of ultrasound are aimed using MRI to target the Parkinson center of the brain and to disrupt the abnormal messages that are going through that area. It is a day procedure. It is done with a test dose followed by a true dose, and people go home with usually some indication of how their symptoms have changed. It is predominantly being used for tremor and not going to address other symptoms related to Parkinson's. It's also only approved to do one side of the brain at the time, which matters for somebody who might have symptoms that focus on one half of their body versus the other. If we could treat one half of the brain and help the symptoms on one half of the body, that's great. But what do you do about the second half? Most recently, the FDA approved that you can treat the other half of the brain, which would address the other side of the body, but you have to wait at least 9 months. And part of that is because what the ultrasound is actually creating a small destruction to the brain tissue. Think about creating a targeted pinpoint stroke. And by injuring that area of the brain in a tactical fashion to disrupt things, you can change some of how the abnormal function of the brain is happening. But you want to make sure that you haven't done more or injured other areas of the brain, and that's why it's spaced apart. Also, not everybody's a candidate for focused ultrasound. Some people have bone in their skull that is too thick to let the waves travel through. And unfortunately, we don't have a machine yet. We are in the process of working to bring that program here. The machine itself costs $3 million. And as you may have heard in the newspaper, UAMS is struggling to keep open in some programs, and to find $3 million to buy that machine when sometimes UAMS is losing money is a challenge. If you know somebody who has $3 million who wants to donate it to us, I'm not joking. We would be very happy to name it after you and them. And we will be very happy to have that. So in all seriousness, Danielle Poole, me, and Dr. Dahl, we will work with somebody who would want to donate that machine to us, and we would love to have that here. We started talking about 2 years ago about how possible, so we have a lot of plans written out. In fact, our service administrator and I, Danielle, were talking about it earlier today. How could we get it here? Anybody who has a nice checkbook and it's not going to bounce, let us know. So that's a little bit on the focused ultrasound side of things. Let me turn it over to our neurologist to talk a little bit about what you see in terms of what gets better and less better with deep brain stimulation.
I feel like I would be one of those with the clinically thick skull for focused ultrasound. So noticeably left out in deep brain stimulation are sort of the non-motor symptoms. And so cognition is often not helped directly by deep brain stimulation and may in fact be worsened in certain targets, which is part of why our neuropsychological team is so important in their assessments and helping us choose targets. The asterisk to that is sometimes deep brain stimulation allows us to get off of medications that are negatively affecting your cognition or provoking hallucinations, like something for dyskinesias, perhaps. Does not improve hallucinations, does not tend to improve the orthostatic hypotension, that where we stand up too quick and the blood pressure drops and get lightheaded, does not tend to help things like constipation, urinary urgency, or frequency. So it is predominantly for motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease. The rest of it still up to us for lifestyle and medication management.
All right, we have another question right here.
Right. A question, a support group that my wife's a member of that I participate with. There's a member in our group who's very enthusiastically endorsing nicotine patches as a possible way to reduce symptoms. I just wonder if you've had any experience with that or thoughts about that.
So it was a study, I'm thinking back on the timing of this. There's a study called NICPD looking at nicotine in people with Parkinson's at two levels, looking at motor fluctuations, ups and downs, and control of symptoms, and also I think a smaller study looking at progression. Both of those were negative. There's reason to think that nicotine would modulate, it works on adenosine, and so there's reason to think that it would modulate the effects of medicine, but unfortunately when we've tested it in trials, the results have been negative. Now, in an individual mind, always anecdote stands above evidence. So it's very likely that they've had good benefits and want to share that.
I have a question from online. When people with Parkinson's don't have access to a movement disorder specialist and they're getting care from a general neurologist, how does that compare? And how does a patient know when they might need a referral and that would be beneficial?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question and very reflective to varying access of care that we have, across the country. We have some places that are very well equipped with, access to neurological care, higher movement disorder care, and then there's neuro deserts across the country. Arkansas kind of being one of them, unfortunately. So just taking a step back to answer your question. So a movement disorder neurologist is somebody who's finished their neurological residency training, which is typically 4 years, and then they do 2 years of a specific fellowship in movement disorders. So in doing that, you really see the breadth and depth of movement disorder pathology, most commonly that which is Parkinson's disease. So you really begin to understand the nuances of Parkinson's disease. What does somebody with just early, newly diagnosed Parkinson's looks like versus somebody who's 5 years or 10 years or even more advanced. And you also get to learn different kinds of treatment options that we have besides just the the medications. You begin to understand how do you approach selection for deep brain stimulation, how do you do programming, and then most fellowships would also begin to incorporate their trainees into research programs. So while it's ideal that you be seen by a movement disorder neurologist, I understand that that may not always be the case. Now, a general neurologist is still a very good first point of contact. Just given the incidence of Parkinson's, most general neurologists come across somebody with Parkinson's at some point in their career, sooner or later. The next question, obviously, is what to do about that. So, there unfortunately still remains a lack of access, particularly in our state. But the thing you wanted to see is looking at a trajectory to being in line to get to see a movement disorder specialist at we are a Parkinson's Disease Foundation Center of Excellence, so usually a higher level neurological care center that has movement disorder access and resources.
We have another question up here. I see one. Yes.
Dr. Dahl, glad you found a chair and joined us. You mentioned the beginning in your diagram of the brain stem and then the movement. Is there work being done to interrupt that process?
Yes, so I think I was, so it's probably even the cascade of spreading pathology is probably even longer. There's some suggestion that Parkinson's may start in the gut for some people. And so it traverses through these really long nerves to get into the brainstem. The next slide from that was the one that we were going to have a post-test on. That's how the pathology kind of spreads. And your point about interrupting it, the trials that we have of trying to reduce the burden of alpha-synuclein, wash the brain out. I talked with a gentleman outside about a clinical trial called prasinezumab, of a monoclonal called prasinezumab. It is to interrupt that cell-to-cell spread of misfolded alpha-synuclein coming out of nerve cells, going on to the next one and kind of infecting it. The LRRK2 based study, again, it's attempt to allow cells to handle their garbage better and, again, prevent the cell-to-cell spread. So those are the attempts at reducing progressive damage spreading across in a kind of a cascading fashion across the brainstem. Yes, ma'am.
I have another question from online for our folks about LSVT particularly, and getting involved in big or in loud. What kind of referrals do people need? Do they need to see ENT first or other things like that before they start to get engaged?
All right. To participate in LSVT Big or the Power Parkinson's Wellness Recovery Program, all you need is a referral for physical or occupational therapy, and that can be received from your neurologist, your movement neurologist, or even your PCP. It doesn't have to come from a neurologist. Usually that's who we get it from, just because that's who's going to recommend that to address some of those motor symptoms. But it doesn't have to be a neurologist. It can be from primary care as well.
So I'll add that the rhythm boxing class, no referral needed. You guys are happy to take anybody with Parkinson's disease wants to come join those classes. Loud for Life, which is a program after you've completed LSVT Loud, the speech therapy program requires, LSVT Loud requires a referral. But I think Loud for Life people can continue with once they've finished that LSVT Loud.
And we have Big for Life here now too. So UAMS is offering both Big for Life if you've done LSVT Big and Loud for Life if you've completed the Loud program.
There's also the Parkinson Voice Project, I think .com or .org, I always get confused, but it's Parkinson Voice Project when you Google it, that is online speech therapy training sessions that can be accessed, to my knowledge, for free, and they are on demand. Big fan of those.
There's also an Arkansas chapter now for PD Voice Project, which is really helpful. Some of my patients have really enjoyed that. I think so, yeah.
So that is out of Jonesboro, what Dr. Bodu is referring to.
Any other hands in the audience? Maybe one down front here.
The dopamine receptor cells being placed in the brain, are we doing that here?
Dopamine cell receptors being placed in the brain. Are we doing that here?
So clarification, it's not it's dopamine cells. And yes, we're an enrolling site for that. Actually, Miss Gwendolyn in the back, or Miss Rasman, Anya, two of our research coordinators, they're the main coordinators. I think Anya is the main one for that one.
Well, let me follow on with a question from online while we're talking about clinical trials. How do you get involved with clinical trials?
rdahl@uams.edu. She just sent me an email. Our coordinators have, I think, it's a long email address, tricoordinators@uams.edu. I believe there's an S at the end. Miss Gwendolyn can, she is
She's
nodding.
nodding.
So you could this is a part of what makes academic medicine enjoyable, is to be at the cutting edge. And so send me an email, I'll hook you up. It's the easiest answer. Or, talk with any of my partners, talk with all of our team. If you see Dr. Peterson and she's talking about brain surgery and you have a question about trials, I know she's gonna pass that on to me. If you're seeing one of my, rehab partners, and you have a question about a trial, I know that's gonna come to me. So just talk with people on your care team and they'll route it.
Please.
Can you speak to the use of HIV meds in Parkinson's?
I'll need a little more detail. That's something that I'm not aware of at the moment.
Oh, my neurologist wants to put me on an HIV med. It's supposedly to break up the alpha neurosynuclein.
So I'll say we repurpose drugs all the time. That being said, I'm not aware of a specific antiretroviral medicine, for example, that it has been shown to do this. And by and large, I think I started my talk with this, that there's no medicine that has been proven to slow progression or break misfolded alpha-synuclein, leading to slowed progression. Right now, it's exercise. And so if you're being suggested a particular medicine off-label, it behooves you to talk about the potential risk-benefit and evidence.
Dr. Schweitzer, we got another question online which sort of builds on Dr. Williams talking about the ups and downs of DBS, which is, can DBS improve cognitive symptoms of Parkinson's? I know that we have our patients come back about a year after their surgery to do repeat cognitive evaluations, and sometimes we see changes in what is on that profile in terms of even their sleep or just overall attitudes and psychosocial behaviors, or maybe even depression and mood changes. Can you comment a little bit on some of the places where maybe some of those things are different after a year?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's on? Okay. Yes. So yes, like exactly what you mentioned, there may be some secondary benefit from improved mood, not thinking so much about a tremor. We also do notice some changes, more declines in verbal fluency, like trying to come up with a word. It doesn't happen with everyone, but it is a common thing that's reported. We might also see a little bit more difficulty with doing things like mental math or trying to think through complex problems in your head. So there can be improvement and also some things that might be a little bit more difficult. If you do notice some difficulties after testing, always talk with us when you come back for your repeat testing. We're happy to refer for cognitive rehabilitation or other exercises that can help with the difficulty that you're noticing.
You know, I'll add a plug to this, which is our group works really in a collaborative way and really hard to ensure we have a good handle on where things are going to be after surgery. So if we're worried about cognition declining, for example, we would sit down, counsel you, and within our group talk about what is a suitable target, whether the surgery is the appropriate thing or not. When we take our patients through DBS, we have pretty significant confidence that things are going to be better for them and that the downsides are going to be limited.
A question here.
Is there any relationship or between celiac disease and Parkinson's disease?
Relationship between celiac and Parkinson's. We had a question from online also asking if Parkinson's is hereditary, so those two kind of go together. Are there things that travel in pairs or with genetics?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, and I'll try to answer the genetic component first and then come to your specific question on celiac disease. So what we call Parkinson's disease today is generally something which cannot really be predicted in most individuals if they're going to get it or not. It's a complex interplay between usually three different things. One is the biological process of what happens to our bodies and brains as we age. So aging, we know, is a major risk factor, which is also why Parkinson's is commonly seen, beyond the age of 60 and above. The second thing is your environmental risk factors. And here we're talking about cumulative environmental risk accumulated over the lifespan of an individual. So much of it is, an interplay of where you live, what kind of things you've been exposed to, and so on. So now there's, well-validated studies which show the risk of environmental toxins and pesticides, for instance, even air pollution and other toxins which can contribute to that risk. And then there's, of course, non-modifiable risk factors, which are the genetics, the genes you inherit from your patients. Now, in most cases, Parkinson's is not inherited. However, there are about 10 to 15% of Parkinson's disease in epidemiological studies, so studies looking at large populations where it seems to be inherited from, a family member. So generally, if I hear the story that, a person, but also several people in the family, almost every generation or so, there's multiple members, then you strongly suspect a genetic cause, a genetic link. But that, again, accounts for a small proportion. Now, another aspect to this is certain loci. So these are certain hotspots in your genes which may either increase or even reduce your risk for Parkinson's. And one of the studies that was mentioned by our speakers today was the PD gene project, which is part of the Parkinson's Foundation. It's part of a larger thing called the ASAP continuum, aligning science across Parkinson's. So we're trying to really understand what the genetic architecture of Parkinson's is across the world, but also from data that we get at a certain place, what is the genetic basis of Parkinson's in that spot? So that, for instance, looks at 7 common genes which have a capture rate of at least 70% or more. So with reasonable suspicion, it'll tell you if there's a link, an inherited reason for your Parkinson's. So that might give you a positive or a negative for those 7 genes. But I hope that kind of answers the question about genetics and Parkinson's, about how much of it may be inherited or not, and cases in which you suspect, an inherited form of Parkinson's. Coming to the question of celiac disease. So celiac disease is basically, there's different forms of celiac disease. There's the classic form where we know of celiac sensitivity, gluten sensitivity to wheat, gliadin, gluten-based products that we consume. There's also certain forms of gluten that we see certain antibodies are elevated across different neurological diseases. But as far as I'm aware, it's not something that has been well established where there's celiac disease clearly increasing your risk for Parkinson's. At the moment, we can't say that there is, if that specifically answers your question. That being said, if you have gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, it's important you probably see a nutritionist, a GI physician, have that treated as well, because we know that other systemic problems can really contribute to one's life and quality of life with Parkinson's. And so it's important that other conditions be well managed as well.
So, yeah, Dr. Williams.
Just a tiny bit to add to that. And the secondary things that can come along with any malabsorptive conditions, we worry about vitamin levels, things like vitamin B12 especially, that regardless of what type of neurologic condition you have, can make you have a little bit more problem. If you've got B12 deficiency because you are on medicines for acid reflux and that has tanked your B12 level, or because you're not absorbing it as well, that can have a secondary effect on your Parkinson's without necessarily a direct effect.
And Jessica and Phil, we got a question from online. What can be done for severe neck stiffness and forward bending of the neck?
Okay, I'll take that one. That's a good question. You see, I would call that increased kyphosis, so that kind of forward head, kind of rounding of the middle part of your spine. If you're having severe stiffness, I mean, that's the word severe. It could be dystonic or dystonia, dystonic posturing or dystonia. That can be a little harder to handle. I would recommend if it's really, really severe to the point where you're feeling it, it feels like you're touching a 2x4, I would recommend getting a referral for physical therapy to get that assessed and treated appropriately. But yeah, we spend all of our life in front of us here. We're on our phones, we're on our computers, we're on our iPads, and getting out of that posture frequently and with intention is important. So doing some things like a pec stretch, for example, in a doorway with your arms wide, both arms out here, leaning, thank you, leaning in through the door frame or into a corner, stretching out the front of your chest, and then doing things to strengthen up the back part of your upper back and the muscles in your neck that support your head. So one exercise called a chin tuck is really silly. It's like someone's in your face and you're trying to not get kissed. You're making a double chin. So doing that and holding it will improve the cervical flexor muscles in your spine and it will increase your ability to hold your head up. And then things like rows, so even like banded rows, like those resistance bands you see at Walmart or at Academy, sticking those in a door frame, rowing backwards, doing some like even wide, like making a T. Those would be like the basic, like, hey, everybody could benefit from this, not just people with Parkinson's, but anybody that's noticing themselves getting into this posture that I may sink into from time to time, and Jessica may remind me that I need to sit up more upright.
So
we've also seen Botox work well for some of that forward head posturing for dystonia. So there might be some interventions that could help with that as well.
And that's perfect, because the next online question was, do Parkinson's patients ever get Botox? So, Hillary?
So actually, I'll take that. So because there's with severe camptocormia, forward dropped head, often my partners and I would think about what are called atypical Parkinsonian disorders. So we'd think about something other than Parkinson's being at play. So that was one, since this symposium is for people with Parkinson's and atypical Parkinsonian disorders, that was an important point I wanted to relay. And then Botox, yes, we all do them. I think Dr. Boudou and Williams do more than I do, so I'll let them talk about it.
So botulinum toxin that for Parkinsonian disorders is again used for dystonia. So we have a nerve cell that releases signals that tell the muscle to contract. In people with dystonia, which I always say is kind of this lady in church, this is an example of dystonia, not necessarily recommended or not necessarily associated with Parkinson's disease alone, but the muscles are inappropriately activated when they should be at better balance or at rest. It is our job to use a toxin that decreases those signals from the nerve to the muscle to weaken it just enough to try to find that balance back. A common dystonia in Parkinson's disease is foot dystonia, where someone's foot is going to turn in, their toes may curl down or up, and then again, the neck is a quite common area as well. So you tell your doctor if you have pain or discomfort from that's not managed appropriately by medications. Obviously, we would choose medications first if possible. And then we will inject botulinum toxin into the muscle or muscles that are causing that abnormal posture. The limitation of that is there's a thing called a Botox roller coaster where it takes a week or two to kick in, may have benefit for a couple of months, and then takes another week or two to wear off. The other thing is that dystonia is complex, and it's often not just due to one singular muscle. We are limited by what muscles we can safely inject and which muscles we can reach. That being said, it can cause a lot of symptomatic benefit in both pain and dystonic posturing. So let us know if you have any questions.
I just wanted to add
go
that
ahead.
while we use Botox for dystonia, there's also two common symptoms I also have patients injected for. So one is drooling, sialorrhea. This is where there's a lot of excess salivation. And so, botulinum toxin, Botox, Xeomin, these injected into the salivary glands can be helpful. And also one thing which happens in dystonia is, again, sometimes blepharospasm, which is increased eye blinking or closure of the eyelids, difficulty opening it. So this is really a very useful tool. Botulinum toxin is used across different neurological specialties, but also particularly for Parkinson's.
You mentioned earlier that research has gone on all over the world, and of course there's a lot of variation of nutrition and elements. But is there an actual environmental element that has been proven to either, to cause symptoms to be more aggravated?
Yeah, so there are a couple of books by friends of mine, Mike Oken and Ray Dorsey, wrote a plan for ending Parkinson's, a recent book, where they talk about exposure to herbicides and pesticides. And more recently in Mike's conversations, he's started to talk about microplastics and how those may influence the underlying biology of Parkinson's. The issue with a direct answer to your question was about change in symptoms after Parkinson's has already started. The issue with that is that when we look at epidemiological studies, very easy to answer a yes, no type of a question. And even that, the answer is often, there's increased risk, but at an individual level, we can't predict whether the Parkinson's was caused by an exposure. Then a dose-dependent effect on exposures that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, and the consequence of that. So hard to disentangle dose-based change on symptom progression, because the disease is variable, not everybody progresses at the same rate, and then very hard to understand previous exposures. That being said, if the intuitive kind of extrapolation of answers, so if we say that something caused increased risk of Parkinson's, doesn't always apply to progression. For example, Parkinson's is less common in people who are smokers. But then the question from the gentleman about nicotine and Parkinson's, when we test whether nicotine exposure would slow progression, the answer was counterintuitive. So complex questions to answer.
Which gives us a lot to look forward to for working on in terms of research, and gives us a lot to look forward to present at next year's symposium as well. Dr. Williams, did you want one final comment?
Please don't smoke.
That's a great comment.
It might slightly reduce your risk of Parkinson's, and it greatly increases your risk of everything else.
Yeah. Well, if you have further comments or suggestions for next year's program, including, part of the reason we're trying to encourage donations is so we could potentially invite an outside speaker like Dr. Oken to come and talk about his book and his findings. If you have other people that you've heard about who you think would be a great person to come and visit this group, provide us those suggestions. We want to make this valuable to you. You've taken 2 hours of your afternoon on a gorgeous Sunday to avoid the pollen and be here with us, and we're very grateful for that. And we really want to make this to continue to be something that is worthwhile to all of you. So thank you to our entire panel. Let's thank them all. Just as a reminder, please save the date for November 7th. We are going to have our second annual Parkinsonism walk at the Little Rock Zoo. It'll be 10 o'clock in the morning. We had lovely weather for the first one, and hopefully it'll be beautiful weather again, maybe like today, minus pollen. And we'll see where we go. Dr. Williams.
And there are baby sloth bears now.
Baby sloth bears. Absolutely. So thank you all very much again, and we look forward to your feedback and your suggestions about where to go things, and thank you for being part of our community.